On this Thursday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we will be discussing the Florida Panthers' 4-3 win on opening night against the Philadelphia Flyers at FLA Live Arena. We're also going to be discussing the roster moves that the Florida Panthers made with Aaron Ekblad's injury, and we're going to discuss some reverse retros. The release has been out for the reverse retros all across the NHL. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, October 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden and Locked On NHL. Will they be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League? So, Cats fans, the Panthers, they made it back to FLA Live Arena. 3-game road trip that didn't end as well as they wanted to, especially based on the injury situation. But let's actually go there first, based on Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour. Good news on the Brandon Montour front, that even though he didn't play on Wednesday night against the Philadelphia Flyers at home, Paul Maurice did discuss that he will be part of the Panthers' next practice. Well, the Panthers don't practice on Thursday, which is also why you're getting a Thursday morning/afternoon release of the show instead of doing it last night. But the Paul Maurice talked about how he's going to be possibly a full participant next practice, but the Panthers will be having a morning skate, which these are optional for Paul Maurice and company. So chances are Brandon Montour, even if we don't see him on the ice Friday morning when they do take on the Tampa Bay Lightning, chances are maybe he could suit up to play. But if he doesn't get a full skate in, I would say more on the side of that he won't. And that's really the difficult part of navigating through the situation, going based on the cap being up so tight against it. And Bill Zito confirmed that with Ekblad's LTIR space, that it's not smart for them to continue to add to the roster from players outside the organization, because then you're going to only make it harder for when you do bring Aaron Ekblad back. And he said it's not season ending, something that we kind of got to that conclusion when we heard grade 2 groin strain based on the Andy Slater report. So around a 4 to 6 week injury at minimum. So the earliest he can come back would be mid-November. It's a game against the Edmonton Oilers. That will be the first game that he'll be back. So it's 10 games and 24 days for Aaron Ekblad. So the following players have been called up: Matt Kierstead, Lucas Carlson have been called up. Lucas Carlson did not participate in the morning skate yesterday as he was on his way to South Florida, but did make it in on time for the game. So a little bit of a difficult situation for Bill Zito to navigate through. And here's the thing: he did speak to the media yesterday at 11 a.m. shortly after morning skate, and just curious to see like what his approach is going to be going towards free agency and even the trade deadline, because all the assets have been shipped out for Bill Zito. There's not a lot of money to spend really this offseason. So it I don't know if we're expecting a quiet trade deadline, or if you do trade for somebody, it's gonna maybe like require maybe like somewhere around a 4 for Zito, somewhere around a 5, a 7, or if you really wanna swing big, you might have to sacrifice a an asset for it that's really high on the Panthers system as far as upside, and that and you don't wanna exit too much of those assets going out. So, I had an opportunity to ask Bill Zito what his thought process is based on going towards the trade deadline versus waiting in free agency come next year. So, this is Bill Zito's answer.
Oh, well, it's going to be a function of A, what you have, B, then you'll do right the cost benefit like you would in any other equation. What do I have to spend? What's it worth? What does it project to be worth? What can I replace the cost of what I spent? Okay. What is the likelihood of my spending resulting in the yield that I'm hoping for? What other factors weigh in? For example, at our last trade, there's so many parts of that equation, right? And then if you don't have any money, well, it doesn't matter. Okay? If you don't have any space, it doesn't matter. If you don't have the assets available to fit the particular need that you're trying to fill, it doesn't matter. So there's so many equations that I couldn't give you one. Yeah. And then in the summertime, it's a little bit different because it's really just cash cap and then what your needs are and can this particular asset fill that need.
And Bill Zito spoke about contingency plans, how he has maybe like 2, 3, 4 types of contingency plans if one player decides to sign an extension with one team that you were possibly eyeing for free agency next year or even someone at the trade deadline. So, and good news is that Gary Bettman a few days ago spoke about there's an opportunity for the cap to go up 4 million more than what was the projected cap, because next year was supposed to go up to 83.5 million. So chances are that we could see 87.5. So with Hornquist's contract gone and the heavy cap hit that Bob's contract brings, there's so much more space with this team and so much more to do that if you want to go sign a few players to even short-term deals or even that have a high cap hit, it's not gonna put the Panthers in a bad spot in their future. So that's really it's a relief. But at the same time, players are gonna want to get paid. They see the markets going up. They see a certain player that might be all-star caliber getting this amount, and they might want to say, "Hey, I want that type of money." I mean, for example, Austin Matthews is gonna soon enough. He's going to be the highest paid player in the NHL. The whole him leaving Toronto is not gonna. It's not happening. I'm not anticipating it based on his status, his how much he's loved by the fans, and he is Toronto. But I just think that's for the Panthers, they just have so much more flexibility. I mean, Cap Friendly says around $10 million right now for the Panthers, and that's gonna go all the way up to 14. Oh man, if you're Bill Zito, you're smiling so much right now, and that's why we continue to ask the question that with Jacob on Wednesday about that. That's why we want to discuss about whether he's having buyer's remorse, and then seeing this news on the cap, just an incredible situation for the Panthers. It's just going to be still a little bit of short-term pain. But the Panthers are 3-1-0. Like, despite this short-term pain, despite being up against the cap, their penalty kill has been outstanding. I mean, sure, they gave up one on Wednesday night against the Philadelphia Flyers, but their penalty kill has been eh, I've been very pleased with what I've seen out of special teams for this Panthers team. I mean, the power play still still has a little bit of it still needs to get going, but still if you build it from the defensive end of the ice, then it's only the goals will come for the Panthers. I mean, the top line for the Panthers has been relatively quiet on the offensive end until Wednesday night. So that it just takes starting on that side of the ice and then building it, that's where the Panthers, with their run and gun style last year, that's kind of what got them kind of into trouble when you're playing such a fast-paced game that sometimes you give up rush opportunities on the other end, and that's kind of like the give and take when it comes to that style of play. And Paul Maurice changing it up and putting a new system and players buying in. So far with 3-1-0 and even up against the cap, it nights like Wednesday night kind of reminded me that the Florida Panthers as a franchise and part of their future, that they are going to be okay. And I personally can be at peace with that, and I hope that you guys listening can kind of think about that really, and the energy that was brought into the building last night. It reminded me of how the energy is still really alive for this team, and just the future is still outstanding for the team. But in segment number 2, we're going to go over more of the Panthers' 4-3 win over the Philadelphia Flyers from FLA Live Arena, a nationally televised game last night for the Panthers. We're going to discuss that next here on the show. But first, we're going to tell you all about Bet Online. And betonline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball and hockey season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Thursday, October 22nd, 2022. And the Florida Panthers, they defeat the Philadelphia Flyers by a final score of 4-3. And before the game even started, of course, morning skate, we going there and seeing the banners for division title, President's Trophy. Cool, they were already up there. Honestly, when you really think about it, doing a banner raising ceremony for the President's Trophy winner after the way they went out in the playoffs, it wasn't appropriate to do a banner raising type of ceremony. So credit to the Panthers for not doing that, first of all. And second, when prior to the game, when they acknowledged the President's Trophy the for the Cats, it was a little awkward, not gonna lie. When they showed on the Jumbotron, and then the first thing I wanted to do when they showed it on the Jumbotron was I wanted to look at the bench and see how many players were actually celebrating the President's Trophy and just the accomplishments. I mean, even with if you raise a Stanley Cup banner that night, you've been processing so much over the last months. Each player had a day with the cup in the Colorado Avalanche, and even then, when you're raising the banner on that night, it's a new season. You want to start over. You want to go right into the game. But for the Panthers in their situation of them not getting embarrassed in round 2, and just the fact with the showing of the banner, the President's Trophy banner, not a single Panthers player did a stick tap on the bench, which I'm not surprised by. And credit to them because I get it's for the fans, and I get that it's a celebration for a wonderful season, one of the best offensive seasons since 1996 with the Pittsburgh Penguins, what they did. But these players, they even spoke about that. That's not the banner that they want to raise. So that if anything should create more hunger for this team going forward. But as far as the game goes, for the Panthers, the undefeated Philadelphia Flyers coming into to the mix on Wednesday night. They played on the first end of a back-to-back in Tampa. Carter Hart started that one, so it led for the the Flyers to start Felix Sandstrom, third round pick, only his 6th career NHL game. And for the Panthers, they really made life hard on Sandstrom. And really Sandstrom for the most part kept the Philadelphia Flyers in it because if you look at any metric of 5-on-5 hockey for this Panthers team, it was really dominated from the start for this team, and even and the penalty kill too. So 5-on-5, the Panthers on Wednesday night, 43 shot attempts to 24, resulting in 27 shots on goal to 19, and constantly taking away the neutral zone, and constantly creating rushes on the PK. If you look at and this is natural stat trick, the what I'm pulling out from here. So when the Flyers were on the power play, 9 minutes and 21 seconds of power play time for the Philadelphia Flyers. The Panthers got 7 shot attempts, including 5 of them on goal. And so while the Flyers were on the power play, 8 shots on goal to the Panthers 5 and having 1 less guy. And Sam Reinhart, c I know he hasn't scored this season, but just a lot of bad luck based on right in front of the net and just whiffing on some opportunities right in front on the doorstep. So just the unfortunate that Sam Reinhart has just constantly found a way to not get one in. And the top line for the Panthers, we spoke a little bit about how Barkov took over the game in Buffalo in that final period when the Buffalo Sabres were pushing, and it was just another defensive clinic for Alexander Barkov. On that second goal by Carter Verhaeghe, the Gus Forsling had an opportunity just maybe like 10 or 15 seconds prior to it, and it all started with a back check for Alexander Barkov right in the neutral zone and created that opportunity for Forsling, and then a few seconds later, Barkov had another opportunity to steal the puck and then getting it to Carter Verhaeghe as well. Carter Verhaeghe, 2 goals, and second straight year that Carter Verhaeghe starts the season with 2 goals on opening night. So if you guys remember opening night last year against the Pittsburgh Penguins, him getting 2 goals, including the game winner for the Panthers. So there's something about Carter Verhaeghe and his scoring 2 goals on opening night. And Panthers were off and running. They never trailed in this one. And even when the Philadelphia Flyers found a way to tie the game, that a little bit of a defensive breakdown for the Panthers in their own zone. Kevin Hayes had like a spinorama pass to Nick Sealer. Bob didn't really have much of a chance on that one, but just for the Panthers, just a little bit of a breakdown in their own zone, and then giving up that one power play goal to the Flyers. I mean, a scrambling puck right in front of the net. Uh, the Panthers unable to clear, Bob unable to glove it down, and just a little bit of a mess for the Panthers there. But regardless of giving up that power play goal, I just the penalty kill for this team has just been incredible. I mean, you think about the minutes that the Panthers have logged as far as defensemen based on now with where the injuries stand. I mean, Ratko Gudas, of his 25 minutes and 11 seconds of time on ice, he spent 7 minutes of them, almost 8 on the penalty kill. I mean, sure, you don't want to take 6 penalties for the Panthers, something that Paul Maurice is trying to clean up. But the Panthers, what they're continuing to do as far as denying zone entries and just get break going out on the rush as well, just incredible what this team has been able to do. Barkov being paired with Sam Reinhart, and then of course Etu Luostarinen. We knew he was always going to have a new partner based on Jonathan Huberdeau being traded. Him and Anton Lundell. There's a lot of center depth on that on that PK unit. I mean, face off for the Panthers hasn't been the best this season, but hey, they got it done on Wednesday night. 63% won 63% of their faceoffs on this one, so they were able to not give the Philadelphia Flyers when the power play time in their own offensive zone when needed. And of course, when you win a faceoff in your own end, you could take off like 10 to 15 seconds off the clock for power play time, and it's fixable for the Panthers. I mean, 3 of the 6 penalties were hooks. One of them was a trip, so it's just a little bit out of control, a little bit with the sticks, but still, Bob's standing tall as well. Wasn't really challenged throughout the first 2 periods. Really, the Panthers, the really all the pressure that Bob had on that Bob had really came down to to really the final few minutes where the Philadelphia Flyers the pull the goalie and bring in the extra skater. Even the Panthers had we're down 6-on-4 at one point. Gus Forsling takes a penalty late, and despite that penalty, Gus Forsling, an incredible night, constantly blocking shots, led the team with most shots on goal. That is your number one defenseman as of right now with Aaron Ekblad out, and of course Mackenzie Weegar no longer being part of the team. That that is what you want out of your number one defenseman. And that's really where you're gonna have to really rely on someone like Gus Forsling going forward, and got an assist on that one, the primary assist. Barkov, despite not scoring, two assists in this one a primary and a secondary. Sam Bennett, my goodness, the pass that he had on Rudolph Balcers, faking the shot, and all eyes on Sam Bennett, and just allows Rudolph Balcers to just get through the defense and go backhand on Sandstrom. Just incredible for the Florida Panthers there. And of course, Josh Mahura, the new cat in town, great puck mover, fast skater. Playing on that third pair, you kind of see why Bill Zito wanted to bring him in off waivers. So, and and even though the Philadelphia Flyers did create a late push, scoring with 3 seconds left, this was a game that I never felt that the Florida Panthers were where it was I didn't think that it was a threat for them to lose, because especially in that second period, I mean, sure, they didn't score a goal in that second period, but if you look at just the second period alone, they were living on the doorstep of the Flyers, and just consistently near that blue paint, low slot. And Sandstrom was just keeping the Panthers, excuse me, he was keeping the Flyers in that game. I mean, just 5-on-5 in the second period alone, 16 shot attempts to 3 on 5-on-5. So really just goes to show the dominance that the Panthers were doing in that second period. And also Paul Maurice was asked about the neutral zone play, which has been really the focal point of what the Panthers have been accomplishing throughout this young season. So let's hear what Paul Maurice has to say about the neutral zone play for the Panthers.
First of all, you want it to be as simple as you possibly can, but you don't want a neutral zone defense that's incredibly passive, right? So I think it's very difficult to change your mindset of how you want to play. We want to play as fast as we can. We want to play as aggressive as we can. We don't want to go in, except here in the neutral zone where we want to be passive. I don't think that you can do that. I think you have to have the same aggressive style of play in all three zones. So you need a system that one is simple enough that we can get very consistent with, but we can also play fast with. So you see our forwards starting to buzz in the neutral zone and knock pucks down and transition back. That's when it right. It's going to take, I still think it takes 2 months to get the real basics down, and then the rest of it's kind of nuances and chemistry of lines. Each line will have a slightly different and almost flavor of what they look like, but that will just come from playing together and me not changing the lines a whole lot. Let these guys get to know each other a little bit.
And also Carter Verhaeghe continued to discuss more of they want to be more responsible in their zone and not more of run and gun. And we spoke about that more in the segment number one, really about why they want to avoid doing that. So really, that's really the the place where the Panthers have been just creating so many of their turnovers, and just getting a stick in the way, and just disrupting anything that the that the opposition is trying to do. And listen, everything that we saw from last year with the Panthers blowing other teams out of the water, it's just still strange for me, seeing after that season, that these are going to be a lot tighter games, tighter checking, and as well, and a lot when it comes to and again, it starts with the defensive end for this team, and Sergei Bobrovsky. Again, when you needed him most, he was there, and third period alone, that's where the Panthers were starting to, okay, 2-goal lead. Don't need to try too many rush chances, because chances are Sergei Bobrovsky could be let out to dry. So that's a little bit of what I saw in the third period. I mean, sure, third period for the Flyers. They it was dominated mostly on after that 6-on-4, 19 shots on goal to 9 in that third period. But still, the Panthers stood tall. They were able. Sergei Bobrovsky, even though there was one with 3 seconds left, hey, it was still not enough for the Philadelphia Flyers to come out with a win or even get a point out of it in Sunrise. So the Panthers give the Philadelphia Flyers their first loss of the season. The Panthers still in very great shape, 3-1-0, tied with the Boston Bruins for the top of the division. I mean, points percentage has the Detroit Red Wings off to a great start this season, that they are leading the Atlantic in points percentage. So very, very early surprises the for the Atlantic division. Let's see if in a few weeks how that balances out, to see if that remains the same. But we all knew that Detroit was going to be much improved this season. But in segment number 3, we are going to discuss the drop of the NHL reverse retro jerseys, and we're going to specifically talk about the Florida Panthers. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Segment number 3 here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Thursday, October 20th edition of the show, where the Florida Panthers are coming off a 4-3 win at home against the Philadelphia Flyers. And next game for the Panthers, speaking of, will be on Friday night, a 7:30 puck drop on ESPN Plus with John Buccigross, Ray Ferraro, and Emily Kaplan. Those will be the people calling the game. So the Panthers, the NHL, they decided to release the reverse retro jerseys for the entire NHL, and everything that we anticipated based on these reverse retros has come to light for the Panthers. It was recently kind of broken by George Richards of Florida Hockey Now, and then the NHL on partnered with Fanatics, kind of teased like a T-shirt on the as the reverse retro. So all signs were pointing for the Panthers to go with the approach of the sun with the palm tree and the hockey stick as the main logo up front. If you're watching this show on YouTube, you'll see that I'm currently doing a screen share, which also means subscribe to the show on YouTube. So you see that there is the palm tree with the hockey stick, and the FLA on the shoulder. You have the FLA for Florida on there as well. So you also see the actual numbers on the back, the text. It's more of a darker blue approach for as far as the numbers. So you see on this one with the 22 and Panthers Adidas jerseys for these. So a different approach for these jerseys. So it's different. It's and we're so used to Leaping Panther. We're so used to the new shield of just the Panther that they currently have. We're so used to the palm tree and the hockey stick on the shoulder, but it screams Florida. That's the best part about it. It screams it, and you see a little bit of neon-ish colors too, which, South Florida vibe. Of course, with the vibes of Miami-Dade and Broward, you want to give it a little bit of that South Florida flavor there, and I think that's the really cool part about these reverse retro jerseys as well. Don't know how much they cost. Don't know, but it's if you can afford it, if you are able to afford this jersey, go ahead and buy it and show it off, because it's a really beautiful jersey. And somebody, I forget who it was out there, that shared all the reverse retro jerseys for all across the NHL, and the one that instantly was the ugliest that I saw was probably Detroit's. Detroit's was probably like No, I don't have a picture to show it right now, but go look at all the reverse retro ones and tell me how you feel about that one. That's the one that I probably dislike the most. Montreal's was okay. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Columbus, Seattle, those are ones that I liked as well, and those happen to be my favorite ones. And of course, the Florida Panthers. It's just the light blue and the palm tree. Just something that we've never seen as far as jerseys before for this team. So hey, once again, if you can afford it, go for it. And uh, I recommend if you are in the area of South Florida to buy it in person, so you don't have to deal with all the backlog of shipping and all that stuff. And a little bit of it'll take a little bit for you possibly to get because those are gonna those are there's gonna be a lot of orders. That's what I'll say about that. Uh, but going back, wrapping up the show and all that stuff, the Panthers, great position that they're in, and you guys as fans of this team, that this is something that's gonna be a continual build for this franchise. And the fact that we spoke about the October schedule, this is the month to take advantage of the schedule. I mean, strength of schedule, you can only take so much of it because teams get turned over so much throughout the offseason that you can't necessarily judge saying that this opponent is going to be exactly the same as previous years. I mean, we spoke about how Wednesday's game could have been a trap game because of John Tortorella, and despite the talent on the Flyers roster, it could be a roster that could have the number 1 overall pick. But with John Tortorella, he creates he gets the best out of a lot of his players, and the Panthers still found a way to gut out a win. The one loss, of course, is against a veteran heavy Boston Bruins team. A lot of players have been to the Stanley Cup, have won as well. So adversity early with these injuries has been great for the Panthers, and it's just really what they've needed in order to help them build to when they do get to April and May, that they could be ready to play their best hockey at the right time. Because after experiencing last season and the disappointment that the Panthers had, it's really about just building great habits for this team and just trying to eliminate some of the mistakes that they have on 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 special teams, especially because of especially when we go and look back at 1 for 31 last year. Of course, the power play is a work in progress for this team. I mean, they went with 5 forwards again last night, so that the Panthers, it's going to take a little bit because you're just everyone's not necessarily out of position, but everyone's in a place that they hadn't been in prior to injury. So having to readjust your mindset and readjust your game plan and your set plays is going to take it's going to take a little bit. So as far as the power play, be patient. I'm going to try to be patient. And if by Sunday, by the time the Panthers face the Islanders on Sunday, uh, and there's no power play goals, then there might have to be a further conversation on that, with the Panthers just only having 2 on the season. So we're gonna discuss that, but hopefully we won't have to go there, and the power play could get going for this team. But one but anyways, thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I had a great time being at FLA Live Arena, and of course being around the media members like David Dwork, Aaron Brown, Roy Bellamy, and company, and even having to meet some Panther fans last night. Got to also meet the GOAT of Florida Panthers Twitter, David Rodriguez at David954FLA. So great meeting him as well in person. If you're listening to this, David, it was great meeting you, and best of luck on your podcast going forward, the FLA Cats Hockey Podcast. So, thank you once again for listening, guys. And on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Nick Fairbanks will be coming back to discuss his opinions on the first 4 games, and we'll get his opinions on the reverse retro jerseys as well for the Panthers as well. So, and we'll be previewing Friday night's matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL. We'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone bring you the fantasy edge to keep you ahead of the competition with daily updates of news, analysis, and advice Monday through Friday. Available on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcast. So Armando Velez signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.